in New York. I work at Hofstra University. I do live there as well. So, as you read in our bios, I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I have a master's degree in international communication from St. John's University. I lived in China for about 4 years after I finished my bachelor's in international studies in French from a school in Atlanta, Georgia. I spent that time there working at a few different companies, teaching English, but also writing language development programs for various hotel corporations and things like that throughout the country. Given a few presentations on education policy around the United States and around the world. And so today we're going to be talking about the things that you need to think about, not only to prepare for business school in the 21st century, but in general going from undergrad to graduate level studies. Things that you want to talk to your students about, things that you want to talk to parents about, if that's the nature of your relationship at the university level, and the things that kind of shape our thinking in the 21st century as far as academia is concerned. So it's 2016, basically almost 17, and so I feel that it makes sense to start off by saying that the way that we look at the world, the way the world communicates, the things that are on our list of what to consider, what not to consider, how to consider, it's changing, and it's changing very rapidly. We've got ever increasing interest in information communication technology, ever increasing necessity in terms of language and ability to communicate across cultures, and those things are very, very important, right? But at the same time, people are thinking about their bottom line, their finances. They're thinking about how they can sustain themselves and their families for the generations to come, right? At the same time, maybe not, they're asking the question, what am I interested in? What is it that's going to not only sustain me financially, but also emotionally and socially and spiritually? Okay? I, for one, believe that it's very important to consider these things, and I don't believe that money comes last, but I think that it maybe shouldn't come first. And as someone who communicates with parents and students, I find an interesting order of priority as far as the list of questions that come. And as someone who reads applications, it tends to be, I'm interested in your school, I need a scholarship, I don't want to pay for the application, and can I get it? So it's interesting. And when you're talking to a parent, it's what kind of job is my student going to get when they finish? Okay, what's their salary? What's the average salary of people like my son, like my daughter, who come from where they come from? So these are the things that parents are, and feel free to comment and chime in, Andrew, as you will, please. We can have a discussion rather than a presentation. I think it might be more appropriate. So my feeling is that you want to really talk about fit. You want to see who you are, what you want, what your ambitions are, and then take it from there, okay? Do you want to stay in the country where you're from, or do you want to go overseas? My personal feeling is that anymore, having an international exposure is quite necessary in really developing your resume. And that's something that you want to make loud and clear to your students as you communicate with them, as they talk to you about what their feelings are and thoughts are. You want to ask them flat out, are you interested in being international? Because it will shape your CV, it will shape your resume, and it will tell people who are reading and reviewing these things that you're open to a challenge, that you understand the diverse culture in which we live today, and how important that exposure to other perspectives and other environments is absolutely. Okay? So, we're talking about value. Okay? And for my purposes, for our purposes, we're talking about international business focus. As I said specifically earlier, the way we look at things has changed. You can't have one specific focus. Okay? You can't just say, I'm an English person with no other focus at all. You can't just say, I'm a math person with no other focus at all. You have to find a common communication. You have to find the lines and ties that bind these subjects, so that you can utilize them and make some money off of them and help people around the world in whatever way you decide to do so. And to take a step back, in terms of the decision-making process, I do personally believe that you should find some kind of a social aspect to how you want to contribute to society with whatever it is you choose to do. And you want to kind of share that message with your students because a lot of people forget to think about social contribution. So my perspective is just because you're a business person, it doesn't mean that you can't be a socially conscious business person as well. Okay? So let's keep that in mind. We're going to be talking about the options that provide value for international applicants, how you counselors might work with students and their families, especially depending on where you're from. Families come into a big play with regards to the decision-making process. I spend a lot of time in China, as I said before, and it's almost like the student's opinion is secondary compared to the familial perspective of what they think the student might or should do to further the reputation of the family, the face of the family, and things like that. So these are things that you really want to keep in mind. I work on a board in New York that helps underprivileged kids go from high school to college. And one of the things that we talked about was our literature only being in Bengali and only being in English. I said, well, there's a huge Mandarin-speaking population, but the trick is you got to understand that the parents don't speak English because they have just come to the United States. And if you're talking two generations, you're talking about grandparents that don't speak English, that are also in the house, that are also decision makers. And so these are the things you want to consider. So you want to consider the familial perspective as well. Make sure you show respect to the families and to what they think about the student and their direction. Okay? But again, I do think it's the best fit option. Okay? Hofstra University, for instance, is in New York. It's out on Long Island. All right? That might not be the best fit for everybody. It's a small school with 3,000 graduate students. Okay? It's got about 16,000 undergraduate students. If somebody wants a larger Ohio State kind of institution, all right, with 50,000 students, then my school might not be for you. Okay? But if you want something that's in a place like New York, Chicago, okay, then that's kind of the environment you want, that's connected to culture and business and a different kind of lifestyle. All right? You also want to consider cost in addition to programs. Okay? And at the grad level specifically, you want to think about alumni relationships. How good of a relationship does the institution maintain with its graduates? Why? Because one of the most important things to consider when you're becoming a graduate student, of course, is what you're going to do after. And when you're in graduate school, your network is really important. And I think the more diverse your network, the better. Okay? So, as I said before, the subjects and the things that we focus on are no longer mono. They're no longer singular in their focus, okay? So when you're thinking international business, what are you thinking? You're thinking information communication technology. You're thinking math. You're thinking geography. You're thinking languages. You're thinking communication, international communication, okay? You're thinking cultural diversity, all right? You're thinking history. You're thinking tradition. You're thinking so many things that go beyond just what's in the book. So it takes somebody that can think across paths and across lines and across subjects to really, really be successful. And somebody has to be very, very aware, very, very conscious of these things to make a dent going forward. Okay? Now, my perspective, and the perspective of a lot of the people at this table, this panel, in the business world, is that business helps somebody draw connections. A, it helps with problem solving. B, of course, it helps you understand the math and the systems of things. But at the same time, it helps you sort it out. And depending on what you choose to do, share your perspectives with other people. So that's communication. Certainly there's an IC3, information communication technology, focus there. You need to know the systems. You need to be up to date with the things that are going on in the world. And you need to pay attention. Okay? At the same time, you want to think about what's going to create value and what's going to create measurable value to you as far as your future profession is concerned. Okay? And these are conversations that people should be comfortable having with recruiters, with administrators and institutions so that they can be assured, or at least comfortable, because nothing is really assured, that they're making a good decision financially and personally. Okay? It's very important to know your craft. It's very important to advise your students to study up. Okay? Just going and sitting in the classroom is not it. Okay? You have to be willing to do research beyond, okay? You have to be willing to read 5 or 6 different newspapers, okay? Study websites, communicate with people, go to sessions, ask questions, participate in things, volunteer, internship, and those are the kinds of things, because at the end of the day, we're talking about creating value that will add value to your CV, okay? And I know for one, that I'm not looking for somebody who's got straight A's and straight grade test scores, but has no exposure whatsoever. And I'm not saying that work experience is mandatory, because in my particular program it's not, but it certainly helps. Exposure to the real world, exposure to various environments is crucial in kind of developing and framing and shaping what will become the best fit for you. Okay. Theoretical as well as applicable awareness of what's going on. So yes, understand the research, but also understand how it affects what happens in the world today. Okay, so I might know the history of financial crashes in 1929 and 2008, but how does that affect real world behaviors? Things like that. Okay, so what does it mean, cause and effect? As I said, researching and scouring events and things like that across countries to try to connect the dots, being creative and not being afraid to kind of dabble in things that may or may not have a direct contact, maybe trying to find the connections between things that are interesting and seeing how they relate to what it is that you want to do. Okay. And then of course, when I get my degree, what should I be paid? All right, because that is important. All right. So again, you're researching. Just because you're going to school, it doesn't mean you're not studying. You're preparing, because you want to be able to, when you're done, sit in an interview and say, well, I've done my research and this is what I think you should pay me, with respect. So we're going to bring it over here to Malay.
So the slides I have to show you are more in terms of charts or graphics. You may be aware of them as well, but I think they're quite interesting. I'll start with this. I just come out of this slideshow mode. So this slide is actually showing a number of countries, and basically you see here, this is taken actually from the World Economic Forum, the Future of Jobs report. This is a public source slide that can be, the whole presentation can be downloaded off the World Economic Forum. They surveyed multiple employers across multiple geographies. One of the interesting things I thought I'd highlight out here is how do job prospects and how do, for that, as a result of that, career counseling vary by geography. So the prediction is that in 2020, this is on the y-axis is actually ease of applying for jobs or ease of recruiting. So this is actually employer perspective, and what this means is this is very hard. There's almost no country which is easy except Italy, where it seems there's a surplus of labor and it's somewhat easy. Japan, for instance, is the hardest to find skills, partially because of the aging populations. I was actually quite surprised by this slide because it shows that the US and India are about comparable, meaning that there's going to be a skills shortage in India just as much as there's going to be in the US by 2020. And we're talking, across industries, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's healthcare, whether it's financial services. This is a kind of composite look by geography. And sort of going back to the slideshow. Is it F5 or?
Just,
I don't know, press the wrong.
No.
It's from the beginning. My second slide is from the Bloomberg Skills Report. This just came out about a month ago, and this is for graduate business skills. It's an interactive slide. If you go to their webpage, you can look at, again, multiple industries, whether it's consulting, financial services, manufacturing, consumer packaged goods. The interesting thing I saw, by the way, here, this is kind of skills that are varying in terms of how common they are. So for instance, work experience and adaptability is less common than risk-taking, global mindset, and so forth. Global mindset seems to be more common. Here on the x-axis is how desirable is the skill for recruiters in the US. And this is a US specific kind of survey. But the interesting thing is, again, about 857 respondents, especially at this composite level, which is across industries. It's fairly true, I think, of many geographies other than the US. The interesting thing I found is that this is the sweet spot. And these are the skills that are less common and also very desirable to recruiters across industries. Leadership skills, creative problem solving, strategic thinking, and communication skills. Another interesting thing is if you play around with this, you change the industry around, you'll find that all of these skills in the sweet spot, they do change except for one. One of these skills stays constant across all industries. It is of huge importance. Can anyone guess which of these four skills, leadership, creative problem solving, communication, or strategic thinking, it could be? Communication? Okay. Any other guesses?
Problem solving.
Problem solving? Okay. So surprisingly, I was actually very surprised by it, but also quite happy because I'm a professor of strategy. It's strategic thinking across all industries, and over years, it has maintained a spot of a lot of importance. There's an accrediting agency in Europe called EFMD. They accredit graduate business schools, schools of management. They in St. Louis in Italy just had a conference. They did a similar kind of survey in Europe. Again, creative thinking and strategic thinking, or critical thinking, if you will, showed up as one of the top skills that recruiters are looking for. How do you develop strategic thinking? And this gets to my story today morning, and perhaps for some of you, a strategic decision might be whether I attend the IC3 conference, or as a parent, which geography or which business school to send my student, my ward. And a tactical decision might be, as I get up in the morning, should I plan to take an auto rickshaw or a taxi to come here, or do I, somehow hire a driver? I decided to take a cab, and there was a rickshaw strike. So my tactical decision making, I think my strategic decision making of coming to the IC3 conference was a good one, but I think tactically I messed up. So there was a rickshaw strike, and it delayed my getting a cab. But this this Bloomberg survey tells you what recruiters look for in terms of business schools. And again, it varies by industry. So an interesting thing would be to understand whether strategic thinking is part of the curriculum. There's a lot of emphasis on it. The US News and World Report, the FT rankings, they all get into strategic thinking as a way of ranking or a parameter to look at what business school or what university to look for. So I think that would be future-proofing your students to that you counsel to some extent if you were to look for this skill. And of course then fine-tune, because all of these skills are important, but for different industries. I now have to share some bad news. And this was the good news that, there are geographies that it's going to be hard to recruit on across the world. Mostly it's a seller's market. That is, you go to a good university for the next 5 years. In almost all geographies, there's an abundance of jobs. It's actually hard for recruiters. And if you are smart enough to get an education which focuses on strategic thinking, it's good stuff. The challenge becomes something like 10 or 15 years down the line. So here are some worrying trends. This is a figure for the US. The UK figure is quite similar. What I find, so I'll just explain this chart. This dark blue line is productivity, labor productivity, and the light blue line is hourly compensation in real terms. And this is not just blue-collar jobs, this is largely white-collar jobs. This is largely the service sector. And what Harvard Business School, this happens to be from the US Census and the US Labor Statistics Bureau. UK has very similar statistics, is finding that there has been a decoupling of productivity increases with wages. What this implies is that basically since about the 1990s, there's been a very stark change in the way recessions have happened and recovery after the recessions has happened. I recently attended a conference at Harvard Business School, and Michael Porter, who was consulting with the US administration, is trying to figure out why is it that after recession, most of the jobs that are brought back are at the lower end of the economy and not at the higher end of the economy. That is, it's creating jobs with low wages, the US is. Paul Krugman, Nobel laureate, in his 2013 column, gave a very interesting reason for this. But this is not the only evidence. There's a lot of evidence. Here is another piece of evidence. This is all the developed nations, and you'll see that the inequality, this, by the way, this y-axis represents income inequality. It is increasing. This is between 1985 and 2008. But if you look at the latest numbers of 2012, income inequality in the US, in the UK especially, are increasing rapidly. Italy, for instance, France, Hungary, and Belgium are not. And I think we don't have Turkey here. Turkey is actually declining inequality. But in the OECD nations, mostly inequality is increasing. This is another piece of evidence. There's something weird going on with the economy where the top 1% or the top 2% or the top 5% are gaining in income much faster than the lower strata of the economy. So what Paul Kruger, the Nobel laureate, and several other thinkers are suggesting, this is because of increasing automation. Paul Krugman's, and I think there's a popular New York Times bestseller, it won the McKinsey Book of the Year award last year, was Rise of the Robots. And essentially what it says is that mass unemployment is looming around 2025, 2030, where increasing automation is destroying jobs, especially at the top end. This is what we're seeing here, the decoupling of productivity and wage is essentially because of that. That is, we're losing jobs at the high end. It used to be that computers are increasing your productivity, you're getting better and better and faster, and your wages increase, you're a more valued employee. But somewhere down the line, it broke us under, and we have a sort of a strange situation. How do you insulate against this increasing automation? I will share with you, I also help out with placements for my graduates, and I was talking to people in large multinational companies based out of India, and they're talking about robotic automation in banks, in service sector jobs, and it's not bringing the jobs to India. It's basically eliminating those jobs altogether from the workforce. And it's happening, it's being done here because the robotics, it's perhaps cheaper to implement here or easier and faster to implement here, but it's happening across the world. So This is not going to be immediate, but I think it's important to look at this trend because I think somewhere down the line, maybe 10, 15 years, if you look at, I think it is this book by a person called Hofstra, he predicts that it will be 2025 or so when this will really become a star and something. So to insulate, I think understanding this automation, understanding where technology is going to impact society and culture is going to have a huge impact, and also trying to find geographies, and I'm sorry to say this, but are perhaps a little bit more socialist leaning and are perhaps going to do more to protect jobs. For instance, the author of the book Rise of the Robot suggests that one solution is to create a minimum wage to help with or improve a kind of basic salary for all persons. So I know that this is getting too far into the future, so before I go too far out, I'll turn it over to Andrew. Cheers. Should I just
Good morning. Yeah, I'm from Singapore, so Singapore Management University. Okay? So if those of you who have not been to Singapore, it's only about 5.5 hours direct flight. Unfortunately, when I came from Calcutta the other day, somebody asked me, where? You're from Singapore? Oh, Thailand. You're not in Thailand, right? You're not in China, so Singapore is our own country. So do visit us, even though there's Zika viruses now, but we go there. Right? Glad to see some of the councillors, but I've been here for the past few years, and unfortunately I may not be able to travel to some of the high schools. So I'm just going to cover some of the things that usually people ask about undergraduate programs. Right? So just to let you know a little bit about Singapore, or Singapore Management University, we are actually a publicly funded university, and it's actually by the government. The one thing about our government is we actually encourage international students to go to Singapore, and with that, the government will give them a grant, right? So something off the tuition fee. So right now it's about 40%. With the cash that you need to work in Singapore for 3 years after you graduate, right? So that's one of the things. So usually people would ask, what's your ranking? Parents, students, it's the same thing. Every year we face the same problems. So we always tell people, what do you want to look at? Ranking or early education, right? So these are the things that we get. So rankings is basically what it is. It's a collection of opinions based on you and I. So we may not know about this university, so we have not heard of. So we rank them lower. Higher, we know them because then we rank them higher. So usually we ask them, maybe you should look at whether this the programs that you're going to is being related, because it's more, there's a small knowledge in it. Because getting the job means sometimes your degree has to be recognized as a relation rather than ranking. Okay, so I just covered it a little bit. So it can be either undergraduate programs or graduate programs, right? So what we are trying to do is at undergrad level, especially in Singapore, we are delivering programs that is actually relevant in the market, where employers will find it easier for them to employ. So at SMU, we do not have things like marine biology. In Singapore, we don't do that. Geography, because end of the day, we don't have the area for them to do the research, right? So we are doing things based on interest-related majors, management-related. So essentially, a social science spectrum. So for double degree, so when students are looking at, I usually prefer them to look at what they are interested in, because where the market is heading, but mainly because of the interest, right? So second major as well. So sometimes we always tell them, second major is good for you to allow you to know about this second discipline, right? So what from the major is good to have the second discipline. specialization as well. So in